Welcome to another episode of Field Notes, insights and observations for the travel marketer. On today's episode, Emily Clay stops by and we're going to be talking all about ecotourism. And as I said, our guest in the podcast, and I'm very excited to jump into this because, Emily, I think you're the only one on our team who's an expert in this part of the field. We're going to be talking about ecotourism. But first, Emily, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you. It's early over here.
I know it, and I appreciate the earliness as I am on the East Coast doing this morning, so I appreciate that. For people who may not know you, though, could you maybe give me the 10,000-foot view of who you are and what you do for advanced travel and tourism?
Oh, sure. My name is Emily Clay, and I work for Advanced Travel and Tourism on the West Coast, specifically in Oregon, Utah, Idaho, Northern California, and the state of Washington. And so, so I've been here for a little over 2 years now. And so I am really focused on digital marketing and coming up with different strategies, really, depending on people's goals and objectives and KPIs.
Let's talk a little bit about, there's a ton of places to go with you because you're a super interesting human being. We could talk about AI. We could talk about a million things with you, but we're going to start with ecotourism, see what other things I can shove into that bucket by the time we are done here. But what spawned the interest in it? Obviously, everyone is paying attention to it, but you've taken a keen interest in it. You have a Substack about, there's a ton of stuff that you're doing in the space. Where did that interest come from?
4 or 5 months ago, I was reading an article about 30 by 30. And 30 by 30 is an environmental initiative. It's a global initiative that really aims to conserve 30% of the world's marine areas by the year 2030. So that's only 5 years away. And I dug in a little deeper and just wanted to find out as much as I could about it and the sense of urgency around it. And so it's really about raising awareness about the biodiversity crisis. So, when we have diverse species, when they survive, then that's good for the entire planet. So, and this 30 by 30 initiative is backed by the United Nations. And the United Nations, as you probably already know, they developed the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals.
Yep.
And a big part of that is about sustainability and how do we preserve our planet?
We're obviously talking to travel marketers, and there are a number of travel marketers who sit squarely in a place that we would easily label as ecotourism. But there's also a lot of other places that are maybe ecotourist adjacent, if you will. If you're a marketer in this space and you're in a DMO, how do you identify those spots where you are in fact sustainable? And the second part of that question, because of your expertise, how do you tell those stories and sound authentic as opposed to a marketing tactic?
Wow. Well, I think the first thing I would say is if you're a DMO to look at, and a lot of people are doing this, a lot of DMOs are already doing this, but partnering with a nonprofit. So for example, we have the Oregon Kelp Alliance, and they're in a region where it's really Coos Bay, North Bend, Charleston area and beyond. It's their purpose is to make sure that the kelp forests are active, and it's making an impact not just in Southern Oregon, but also in the state of California, in Washington, all the way up to British Columbia. So I'd say partnering with a nonprofit. But in terms of authenticity, I think it's about how do you take those actions? How do you take those steps? So Visit Bend is doing something really interesting where they have a whole sustainability fund for different projects throughout the Bend community. And they've already contributed over $3 million for these different projects. And so there's a bunch of, so part of the, tax and lodging, those tax monies can go to that fund, right? And so in Oregon, I'm in kind of the magical place of sustainability.
What sort of things are going on around there that you could share with us?
Right. So there's something called the Human Access Project, and it's really an organization that promotes and protects the Willamette River, but they're doing something fun in their messaging. They're calling it a riverlution instead of a revolution. And then they also call it a movement that is disguised as a party. And so the Willamette River has had some bad press, we'll call it, regarding the polluted river, and they've cleaned it up a substantial amount over the last 10 years. And I've heard back and forth as well about people. Well, is it really safe to swim there? So these people are advocates, and they throw these huge parties where people are in inner tubes and they're blaring music. And so I love that because, in the United States, there are 3.5 million miles worth of rivers,
Oh,
and
wow.
only 50% of them are not polluted, are, places where you can swim.
Sure.
And so getting really creative and making it fun, I think that's one way to resonate with people who want to become involved but don't necessarily know how.
For those of us who don't live in magical places of sustainability, though, I wanted to ask this question because I wonder, you wear two hats in our organization. One is you're an expert in this space and you understand obviously the goals of ecotourism and why they're important and where we should point our compass if we're looking for that type of data. But you're also a marketer. And if you're a travel marketer, should it be part of the job for them to report on the sustainability efforts on the back end, right? So we've done these sustainability efforts that make it an eco-tourist destination, and then people come to that destination, and then do we need to report out on how we have kept sustaining said locale, right? So here in Michigan, let's use Pictured Rocks National Lakeshore as an example to get it out of Oregon for a second. Is it interesting to the outside world that you report on those stats as well as, hey, come see the amazing place and here are the hotels and here are the places to eat?
So I think if you have a little bit of social engineering added to it, we are goal oriented, especially in the United States, kind of sometimes annoyingly. But what if we positioned it as a way to say, if we have 50 volunteers who can do X, Y, and Z and cover this amount of region and waterways in particular, that's my passion,
Yep.
then what would it look like? It would look like this. This is what this group achieved. What if we could do this? And if you can really attach those kinds of data points to it and make it about, look, we can all be ambassadors here and we can all make a difference. We can all don a wetsuit and jump in. I think if you make it about what the potential is and what the impact is, then that could really resonate with people. Get a group of your friends and let's figure this out. Let's tackle this region, and make it healthy, competitive
Right.
situation.
Yeah.
So that's just one
Sure.
idea,
Yeah.
but in terms of overall messaging, you can talk about the data. I mean, there's always, scare tactics, but what about hope and possibility?
Yeah.
What about changing it up and talking about what we can achieve in our future instead of the demise?
What is in your mind, because you're like I said, you've got a Substack, so you spend a lot of time thinking and writing on this topic. From a marketing perspective, next 5 or 10 years, what does ecotourism look like in your brain, and how can travel marketers train up or skill themselves up to be ready for those changes as they arrive?
I think just keeping abreast of what's really happening in this space is one, but also taking a look back. I mean, we weren't talking about this very much 10, 15 years ago. Maybe Al Gore was, right?
Sure.
But now
Right.
there's a noticeable difference. I mean, it's early June and we didn't see the sun in Portland until mid-July. I grew up here and now it's going to be 75, 76 degrees today. And so we're seeing the changes. And I think if people take the time to read a few articles, look up the United Nations 30 by 30, look up different organizations and see what they're doing and talk to experts in the region to get a deeper understanding and see how they can maybe make an impact, even as a DMO, because I think when you read a lot, and Katie Couric has said this, when you read a lot and you nerd out, that's when you can see future possibilities. That's when you can see solutions. And I truly believe that. So especially if you have a bunch of different interests, that's when you can kind of go, oh, this could happen. Oh, I can see the use case for this.
Now, would you recommend, if they haven't already, I can't imagine how many have not, but if a DMO has not started at least a relationship with the DNR in their locale, is that where you might start if you don't already have that kind of relationship?
Yes, I would absolutely start there, because they would, welcome that opportunity to connect, because what if they could come together and create a really cool ecotourism program, and not only benefits the community, but it could be transformational for the people who come and want to contribute and meet new and interesting people and do something meaningful instead of sitting on the beach, or instead of, renting a jet ski. And jet skis are great, but, what if you came together with a really amazing educational program and, imagine donning your wetsuit and hanging out with a bunch of enthusiastic marine biologists. I mean, like, that would be super fun, right? I mean, it can be. You can geek out over this stuff, but you can also make it interesting and fun, and where it's imperative, where people want to contribute, that, make it a FOMO situation.
Sure. Yeah, well, as somebody who spent a birthday on a boat with a marine biologist going out to the Farallon Islands, you don't need to sell me. Like, I'm all in on this thing. But for marketers who are maybe new to the space and thus new to ecotourism, what's like the number one or two pitfalls they should look out for where that kind of messaging falls flat because it hasn't been done the proper way? Like, what are things that you see and you're like, ooh, if only you had done it this way as opposed to that way?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I think, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, I think focusing on the negative or the scare tactics, I don't think that's inspiring. And I don't think that's a way to endear movement forward and motivate people to want to take action. So I think that's something to be mindful of, and instead talk about, look, if we can achieve this, this, and this, we can get to here by this date, that kind of thing. So I think the pitfall would be don't be negative. Look at, really, and think of what would attract you to contribute in ecotourism and be that conscious eco traveler, and reverse it, or talk to other people too. Like, would this attract you? Would this brand messaging attract you? That sort of thing.
So, Emily, I would be remiss if I did not leave with this question. If somebody's listening to this podcast and they've been curious about ecotourism, they don't know much about sustainability and conservation in general, if you could name one book or one documentary they should watch, what would be your top pick if you could only pick one?
The David Attenborough called, I think it's called Ocean.
Yeah, Ocean. Yep.
Yes. And so he's a specialist, and I think it's his call to action in terms of really looking at how our waterways can help heal the entire planet. And so I think it's going to be a pivotal movie where people stand up and say, oh, wow, I didn't know that this is possible. I didn't know that we can actually make a massive change. And so how do I get involved? And I think that's what, and movies do that, you know, on an emotional level.
Emily Clay, it has been an absolute pleasure. I know you're off on PTO, and I appreciate you giving us the time. Have a wonderful day, and we'll catch up when you get back.
Great. Thanks so much for having me.